Coming up, this is our 200th episode of the DTVC podcast, and our guest is Mitch from the Video Vacuum. We'll be looking at the Megan Fox Netflix movie Subservience, so stay tuned for that. Then next week, we've got Scott Murphy from All 90s Action All the Time On. We'll be looking at Black Dawn, so we'll be continuing his move, or his journey through the Steven Seagal DTV oeuvre. And then in 2 weeks' time, Ty from Muppets On will be looking at Fortress 2, the Bruce Willis film, not the Christopher Lambert film. And also we'll be looking at Last Kumite, not to be confused with Last Kumite, which actually doesn't exist. But anyway, keep an eye out for that one in 2 weeks' time. Yeah, and then before we get into DTVC Extra, again, I just want to thank everybody for the support, guests, listeners, everybody that has gotten us here to 200 episodes, and we're going to kind of keep this thing going, whether it's 3, 4, however many. If we keep working on this once a week approach here, we should be hitting 250 sometime early next year, and kind of just, maybe every year or so we'll hit another milestone like that. So, looking forward to keeping it going. I think once a week is probably the best you can do when you're not getting paid. And you have to have a job, right? Because you got to keep booking guests, right? That's the thing. I think if you're getting paid to do the podcast, you could afford to have somebody book people for you or something like that. I don't know. But once a week has been a lot of fun, and I want to kind of keep it going. So yeah, again, thank you everybody for your support, and we'll kind of keep going from here. Speaking of keeping going from here, DTVC Extra, I just watched all of the Sony Spider-Verse movies. So I'm going to try this week to do an episode just on those movies. So maybe like first half would be the first 3, second half would be the second 3. So keep an eye out for that DTVC Extra. Again, if you're not subscribed, you should subscribe, because I usually don't do social media anymore for the DTVC Extra ones. I just put them out, and if people get them, they get them. If they don't, they don't. But yeah, definitely keep an eye out for that. Now, in terms of the site, this past week we did Victim of Desire with Shannon Tweed, Julie Strain, Wings Hauser, so a great cast there. Also, Cole S. McKay, we finally tagged him to the tune of 56 tags. So if you don't know Cole S. McKay, he's one of the great stunt coordinators, worked for PM, other DTV outlets. He's done some Seagal movies. I think he's done some Emmett Furlow Oasis movies. So he's definitely been around. I have to thank Chris the Brain Kavinsky for putting him on my radar. When he was on the Sweeper podcast, he mentioned him. And then I was talking with John Cross about PM movies, and he mentioned Cole S. McKay again. I was like, I should tag him and see what that looks like. And at 56 movies, he's actually ahead of our Camacho now for third most all time after Dolph and Gary Daniels. So pretty soon we'll get him in the 50 club. We'll get a Hall of Fame induction for him this fall. But yeah, really cool to finally have him tagged. Then next week, this weekend, we're going to do Boudica. That's Olga Karolinko and Jesse V. Johnson directing. So look for that review this weekend. And then, in terms of other stuff that I've done, recently I was on with the guys from Comeuppance. They just posted that one over the weekend. It was kind of a hangout episode where he's kind of just talked about random things, but it was a really fun episode, about an hour and a half long. So if you're not subscribed to Comeuppance, you should be. You can check me out on that episode. Again, the Lambcast, that was a couple weeks ago that I was on there. We did our pre-1968 sci-fi draft. So you can see there, my draft was a little MST3K heavy with a little Jean-Luc Godard thrown in. So probably people aren't really voting for my list, but hey, you want to check me out on another podcast, definitely check me out there. And again, it's another podcast to be subscribed to. It's a lot of fun. And then coming soon, John Cross, he's got a PM Entertainment podcast coming. And so I did Steel Frontier for that podcast. And so that should be coming sometime here this month. So keep an eye out for that as well. And of course, once that's available, you'll find on my site, but you probably want to subscribe, do all the usual bits that you do with podcasts for that as well. All right, so I think that is everything. Again, just before we start the episode, reminder of my books, Nadia and Aiden. It's my newest book, is available on Kindle, Kindle Unlimited, and paperback. You can find the link in the podcast description. Also, Bainbridge, my short action novel, same thing. Kindle, Kindle Unlimited, paperback. The link is in the podcast description. So always appreciate anybody who wants to pick up my books. And again, remember that the Kindle is a lot cheaper than the paperback, but I get the same royalty. Also, if you have Kindle Unlimited and you start the book, I get paid for however many pages you look through if you're on Kindle Unlimited. So if you start the book and abandon it, I still get some money for that. So again, always appreciate any support people want to give me for my books. Well, with that, why don't we have John Cross from Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures playing our theme song, and then when we come back, episode number 200 with Mitch from the Video Vacuum. All right, welcome back to the DTVC podcast. As always, this is Matt here, and I'm joined by very special guest. We've got Mitch Lovell from the Video Vacuum. Welcome back, Mitch.
Hey, Matt, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, and this is a very special episode as well. This is our 200th episode, which it's kind of fitting. It kind of just worked out with the scheduling that you were on for the 200th one, but it kind of worked out because other than the guys from Comeuppance, you've been on the most.
Yeah, I mean, I feel pretty honored to not only be here so much, but for number 200, that's huge. Congrats.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, if you're curious, and I would say it's a competition, but I would think, out of your episodes that you've been on, the the one that's got the most, downloads since I've made the move to Spotify from TalkShoe is the Seagal one.
Oh, nice.
Yes, yeah. So, and that seems to be the case for a lot of people. If you do a Seagal episode, that's usually your most downloaded one.
Well, there's just so much to talk about, and I think we kind of hit a sweet spot with the TV films. I don't think too many people cover that one as kind of in depth as we did.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. And then, a couple other ones. Interesting is the Wave, the mail order murder episode where we talk about Wave Productions. That one started off with not a lot of downloads, but that one has like kind of surged. I think it's one of those things where people just had to find it, like people that not so much, people that listen to the pod, but also people outside of that. They must have been searching for Wave movies and found it because that's one I think, as someone who was wanting to proselytize, right, is trying to get everybody involved with Wave movies. The fact that that one grew in popularity is good.
Yeah, that's cool too because it's available on Tubi, Mail Order Murder, and I think that's like for a lot of people that's a good jumping off point to see if Wave movies are your cup of tea. And fortunately, there's a lot of people out there like us that is their cup of tea.
Yes, yeah. And what's interesting about those is that, about those Wave movies is how many of them are available, on different services. I mean, I tried Internet Archive to find some free versions, and those aren't always as easy. But I mean, there's even like Blu-rays of those movies.
Yeah, I think it's Saturn's Core, who's a subsidiary of Vinegar Syndrome. They've put out a lot, and I try to keep up with them as best as I can. And so yeah, I mean, even if are disappointed by a Wave movie, you can't be disappointed because it still gives you everything you want, namely like girls in bikinis being chased around by madmen, and it's all shot on video for about $12.
Exactly. I think where they can be disappointing for people is if the movie is supposed to feed into your, whatever the fetish is that the viewer is watching, if it doesn't do a good enough job on the fetish part of it. So yeah, I think what's great about the documentary is that the guys watching them, that are talking about the movies, that are fans, they don't seem to have a specific fetish that the movies are playing into. They just seem to just like the movies themselves. And in that sense, it's like you said, when you go into it with that approach, they always work on some level.
Yeah, and I think they mentioned too where it's like, if you're watching your fetish play out, it would be different, but you're watching somebody else's fetish play out. So it's almost like this kind of weird peek into somebody else's brain.
Yeah, it's to give people an idea of how the production company Wave Productions was just from South Jersey, so it's near here. The way that they were funded was that people would pay money to have these various fantasies that generally involved women either being tied up, strangled, drowned in quicksand, or all three. Those were probably the most common ones that you would have, and so that would fund the movies, and then they put the movies out so anybody could buy them, and then in the 80s when video stores were looking for things to fill their shelves, they were just buying that stuff up.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting too because then they would later take all the movies and Gary Whitson, the owner, he would go and make his own films. Like but like I think those films are always good, but it's always like those weird niche ones like Eaten Alive that always wind up like kind of like I start gravitating back to.
Yes. Yeah, there's always some really, really fun ones in there. So yeah, that's a great one. So people haven't listened to that episode. We get into some great stuff on there. But like you said, that documentary on Tubi, Mail Order Murder, that one is just that going into the wave productions. I think if you're into to old movies, or I'd say old movies from the 80s, movies, but VHS movies, that time is just a fascinating one. And so, yeah, that's a great one. I feel like we kind of live up to your site's moniker as the Video Vacuum because we kind of cover everything when you're a guest. We've kind of run the gamut of different genres and styles.
Yeah, it's always fun too to kind of search through the trash, so to speak, to see what's out there. And a lot of times, it's just like uh, g- going to like a thrift store or something. You can go 5 or 6 times not seeing anything, and then like the next time you go, it's like you hit pay dirt. And that's the way I always feel. It's like just branching out and finding these like weird niche movies, and it's like you never. Like to quote Forrest Gump, you never know what you're going to get.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I think nowadays it seems like people are more likely to narrow their focuses than to do like you said with the branching out. Like, my wife and I, we like, a lot of soft rock from the 70s, and there's that whole yacht rock movement thing, which has helped us because it means that music kind of becomes more popular. Like you can, turn on TV and see some Michael McDonald or 70, whatever, 10cc. But what my wife finds when she goes on Reddit is that younger people who are like new to this kind of stuff, they feel like it does. They're obsessed with this idea of, does this music count as yacht rock? Like, does it count as what the guys who came up with the term yacht rock, does it count? And she's trying to impress upon them that it's not about whether it counts or not. It's about, does it sound good to you? And if it sounds good to you, then you can make it count. Use this as a stepping stone to find more kinds of music. And I think that's the thing for us, right? Is that we, instead of being like, I only watch like elevated horror, that's a certain type or whatever like that. It's like we just kind of use all of it as the branching out, whether it's like going through their IMDb page or the the Tubi suggestions. And I think it's a better way to do it.
Yeah, and I think too, with Tubi, especially Tubi's algorithm is like so on point, at least for me, that like I can easily watch one movie and then wind up adding 20 just based on the, recommendations alone. Now, I am a kind of person like if I see one actor or actress in the cast list, I just add it, regardless because I'm a fan. But yeah, with just the way that Tubi, like it was kind of funny because this year Tubi had the Super Bowl,
Yes.
and it was like almost like kind of going to high school with somebody that like went on and really made it, because I was like.
Right.
I was watching Tubi like 10 years ago and like, streaming it on my laptop or whatever. And now to see it, it's doing good. It's got, broadcasting the Super Bowl. I feel like, I feel like I was there at the beginning. So, but that's neither here nor there. But like, yeah, like just I mean, Tubi's always the first place I look when I'm just in the mood for something goofy, whether it's like, I think earlier this week I watched Ouija Shark 2
Oh, nice.
because I couldn't get enough of Ouija Shark 1. And, this one was Ouija Shark versus Tarot Gator. So it's like, yeah, like, was it good? Sort of. But like, it was 79 minutes of fun that, I didn't have to think about while I was folding laundry this week. So I think Tubi is always kind of that go to place of like, if you want to really expand your horizons with your movie watching taste, just kind of go through the cult classics, go through the. I mean, they have so many subgenres too that I think there was like a Nicolas Cage specific algorithm on there too. So it's if you're really looking to diversify your movie watching, definitely go to Tubi.
Yeah, no, I can't agree more. I mean, and the other thing too is it's like both diversifying, but also too like the size of rabbit holes. 'Cause I remember you were doing on your site, you're doing like Amityville April, and it got me thinking. I was like, there's 30 days in April. Could you conceivably do a movie every day that's a different Amityville? And Tubi actually has 30 different Amityville movies. They have more than 30 Michael Madsen movies or more than 30 Eric Roberts movies. I think your creature feature one, like you're talking about there, like what, gators or different animals, there's definitely more than 30 of those. But I think you could do like 30 shark movies or maybe 30 gator movies. So it's like the size of the rabbit holes that you can get into, whether you're branching out into different things or finding some unique niche subgenre to really delve into. Tubi's got it all.
Yeah, like, diversifying or plumbing the depths, either
Yes,
one,
exactly.
because there's a lot of ones that are just, like they make wave movies look like Gone with the Wind at
Right,
some point. Some
yes.
of those movies.
Right, 'cause that's the world we live in right now, where it's like there's this democratization that kind of works on two levels, right? That like, you could, if you've got a decent enough iPhone and a decent enough understanding of how movies work, and you've got some friends that are willing to act for free, you could make something that you could put on Tubi. And if you've got like some of the movie finishing programs on your computer, especially if you've got a Mac. But by the same token, it's like, yeah, if you're an indie director who is putting, tens of thousands, even maybe $100,000 into a movie, and you want to try to make some kind of return on it, it's hard because the space is so democratized. And so, yeah, for us as the viewer, though, it's a great way to support indie projects. You can just, you could really kind of get outside the big names and just, watch something, let those commercials roll, and get them that money for their indie projects.
And speaking of commercials, I mean, Tubi doesn't really show that many commercials, compared to some other streaming sites, and they're pretty, evenly spaced out. Where some of them, when you're watching, like they'll cut mid sentence, like they'll be about to tell you, who the killer is, and then it's like Clorox wipes, and it's like, and you're like, oh wait, go back.
Right. Yeah, we just so we originally were doing Hulu without ads because my wife and I were going through Scrubs, and the ads kept like freezing it on the TV when because we were watching Hulu through the cable box or trying it through the Roku, and it would freeze a lot of times. So we just decided to get rid of the commercials altogether. But between Disney Plus and ESPN Plus upping their prices so much, we decided, okay, let's go back to ads, because really she doesn't do a lot on Hulu. And then for me, I do the Disney Plus stuff like that. But I was watching WandaVision, and I got through the first 8 episodes the night before our plan went to having commercials. And so the next day I was watching the last episode with commercials, and I was just like, man, it was just, and they were really pushing that new Captain America Brave New World on me. It was just, like, so like I'm like getting to this point in WandaVision where I'm like, okay, we're gonna get a big reveal on who the baddie is or whatever. And it's just like, hey, out now as the number one movie in the theaters. And it's like, yeah, I've been hearing enough about Captain America Brave New World. Get me back to the TV show.
Yeah, it's frustrating, especially like, when you signed up, like, eons ago,
Right.
and nothing was had ads, and then
Yeah.
now it's kind of, that is the one bad thing about Tubi. Everybody's looking at Tubi's kind of platforming, the fast model, and kind of co-opting it, and just because Disney has their Disney Vault and the Hulu programming and ABC stuff. It's like, I guess they feel entitled to not only make us watch ads, but pay to not watch ads. But then you still wind up watching ads anyway. So,
Right. Exactly.
and
Right.
and I don't mind, like Peacock. They they front load all the ads. They give you like 2 minutes of ads. You hit play. You can go to the bathroom, make yourself a sandwich or something, come back, and your movie starts, and you don't have any ads. I think honestly, that's probably the best model to work with if you're gonna have ads and pay for something.
Yeah, I agree completely, because I think the worst is like the Lifetime movie approach, where, when you're watching them on linear TV, where they go like the first half hour with no ads, and then it's at the end when everything's happening that they do commercials like every 5 minutes almost. I mean, literally, like it's like 5 minutes and there'll be another commercial. And yeah, Peacock is a little bit better about that. I wonder too, like with certain ones like Peacock, for example, if they're like, well, we've got NFL and we've got different things. So I guess no, because Disney's got it too. ESPN's got NFL, because think about like where they've got revenue sources from that, they can, sort of not be so difficult with the ads in certain places. And so I guess the other thing too is that Peacock, I think, we have Peacock because it comes included with our cable package. So that's why, we've got the one with ads. But I wonder if that's part of it too, is that um, they're not as competitive maybe as like Disney Plus, and so they finding ways to make it a little less onerous to get people to use it.
And also too, when all that, the streaming kind of wars started, it was kind of just before COVID. And I think once COVID happened, everybody's home watching TV.
Yeah.
And then now, everything's, had gone away, but things are much better. and people are out doing, living their life, and they're not having the same kind of viewership numbers they were. So they're trying to supplement that. I mean, I'm no, analyst or anything, but I have a feeling that that whole kind of shift happened about, a year and a half, 2 years ago. And I think that was kind of the sticking point of, people aren't watching, getting up at 8 a.m. and watching straight through to midnight anymore. So.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about that. And I think also, yeah, people are getting out more. And I wonder if too, with, sort of a lot of the turmoil, especially here in the United States, if more people are going back, fewer people are going to new things and more people are going back to old things, like up just rewatching things that they watched before and enjoying those, knowing that they're there. And I wonder in that sense that like for example, my wife's a big Mad Men fan. Well, she owns all the episodes or we own all the episodes on Amazon, so she doesn't have to go to any street. She can just watch them, there instead of that. And I think that seems to be like I've seen people doing rewatches of things like Breaking Bad, and Sopranos, and things like that too. And I wonder if that's also hurting it. That people, there isn't like that whole prestige TV thing, water cooler deal where it's like, oh, if you're not watching whatever it was, Succession. Everybody's talking about Succession. Now it's just like, maybe you go to a podcast and somebody's talking about Succession before they get into like the meat of their episode, and you just skip that part and just, go back to, them talking about sports or whatever. I wonder if that's also hurting it too, that combination of people getting out more and then people also retreating to more things that they kind of find more comfort food in.
Yeah, that's a good point too. And, and I think physical media kind of, ebbs and flows a little bit, and I think we're kind of on the uptick on physical media right now, and I think a lot of that too is that there were times where you people had it really good, they could just go and stream whatever they want. That I think they're finding out that it's not always going to be there. And if you want to watch something literally on demand, the best way to do that is physical media, and to actually go out and buy, whether it be the Seinfeld or Friends or any of these things that have like kind of a limited time span when they're on a streaming service.
Yeah, no, that's a great point too, because I think, like you said, like Seinfeld is a great one because it seems to bounce between different services. It seems like Netflix, which we'll be talking about here in a second, they had it for a period, and then I think Max might have had it, and I don't know if Hulu tried to get it or Disney Plus, but they've all tried to grab it, right? Because they kind of use it as an anchor. Friends is another one. I think Max had that one for a while. So that's the other piece too, right? Is that if you're subscribed to one but not the other, and they lose the one that you wanted to watch, now you're in trouble.
Yeah, and it always seems to be like, when I've watched something, even though it might only be like 2 or 3 seasons, like I'll watch the first season, kind of get bored in the second season. Then when I finally say, okay, I'm going to finish it up, it's nowhere to be found. And then it's, you know what, and then it's like, well, there went that dream. But, there's so much out there too, that I think, whether a certain site is missing this or that, I mean, there's still so much out there that you could probably decide on something fairly quickly. I say fairly quickly because I'm the kind of person that just scrolls and scrolls. For like, I probably could have watched an entire movie by the time I land on something, but like I said, like most of the time I'm adding more stuff to my queue, and then it's just I don't want to say out loud how many movies I have in my Tubi account. It's over 600 probably. So there's no, and that's why I did like a whole thing a couple years ago where I just watched nothing but Tubi movies. I'm like, well, there's 365 movies I can clear out of my queue. I ended up, for every one, I added 2 or 3, so I wound up with 600 or 700 more movies
Right.
anyway. So it was all for naught, really.
Yeah, I'm not quite there. I'm more like close to 400 in my queue, but that's because a lot of times I'll go in and pair things out. Like I'll be like, okay, I added that or whatever. But the other thing that happens, I don't know if you find this happens too, that a movie that gets taken down gets re-added back, and it goes back into your queue when it's added back.
Yeah, that's always a nice little bonus, because in so many times I do like it too. They'll tell you that you have like 7 days to watch or whatever, if you really want it to get on it. And another thing too is they have a lot of the kind of like the stuff that was on HBO maybe like 2-3 years ago.
Yes.
So like it's like if you kind of don't want to really, bite the bullet on Max, you could just get Tubi for free and just kind of watch like the leftovers of, what they were showing a few years ago. Um, but yeah, it is always a nice little thing when you go back into your queue and you see something that you thought you lost forever, and then it's like, but then I never watch it. I wound up watching something else twice as stupid.
Right, exactly. That's the thing. Exactly. Yeah, it's interesting because we're transitioning to talk about Netflix here. I mean, Netflix is the one that really starts it all. I mean, Hulu, of course, comes around the same time, but I remember when Netflix Instant first came out, and of course, at the same time, we still had DVDs at that time. They were still doing discs. But I remember the early days of Netflix. It was very similar to Tubi in terms of like what they had available. So a lot of direct-to-video kind of stuff, low budget kind of stuff, and also, if I remember right, the low budget stuff. But then also. Cable channels like Stars were putting their catalogs on there. So it was a really interesting space. And it's been interesting to see now. I mean, we're now like what, 15 years out at this point, maybe closer to 16, 17, how it's evolved to where Netflix is still the king despite all of these other companies coming in and doing their own things and create, vaulting their products and all of that. So it's I don't know what your thoughts are on sort of the rise of Netflix here in this period.
Yeah, it was really interesting because back in those days, I was actually one of the beta testing
Oh,
for Netflix, and it was a catch 22 because we lived in the boonies, so we had like satellite internet, which was terrible.
right.
And if you wanted to watch anything, you had to get up, like you had to watch it in a non-peak hour, which to them was like 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. So if I wanted to watch anything, I'd have to get up obscenely early in the morning and hope. So a lot of times I would be able to watch 15, 20-minute intervals without like reaching my usage cap. So, but I remember the first movie I ever watched on Netflix streaming was The Majorettes, the John Russo 80s horror movie. And that was the kind of movie that was all over Netflix at that time, like the old, just kind of like um, down and dirty 80s horror movies like Cheerleader Camp and stuff like, yeah, stuff like, now that you would see all over Tubi. Now Netflix would be ashamed of themselves if they were streaming that. But yeah, it was really kind of the wild wild west at that point. Then once my internet situation got better, that's about the time when Netflix was doing their own original programming, so they were kind of getting less of that stuff. But about that time was when Prime kind of picked up the mantle of just like the catch-all kind of crap exploitation, 70s, 80s grindhouse stuff. And so really when I really started picking up with the streaming model was like right around when Prime started coming into prominence.
Yeah, the thing I loved about Prime and Netflix at that time for their movies was for somebody who had a review site, which I did, and I needed to get screenshots. Prime and Netflix were the best because you could pause it, and then the slider bar and everything would go away, so you could get a nice clean screenshot. And for whatever reason, Prime and Netflix are still the only two that really are good like that. Like Tubi, I've got to kind of do it in motion, kind of hope I can catch it, to get the screenshot there. And Hulu was like that at that time. Hulu was not as good as the other two, and so I remember I didn't use Hulu as much as I did Prime and Netflix. I mean, Netflix was all the time. I was using that one all quite a bit. But yeah, and then it's like there was that period of time before you got Disney Plus, Paramount Plus, HBO Max, and those ones where you had Netflix and Hulu that had grown and Prime, they were the big ones. And then that's where Tubi starts to come in. And you also had, I think, what were like Film Rise or Fossum, and you get like all of those really kind of cheap streaming channels. I know my wife and I, we still love watching like low budget documentaries and things like that on there. And so, like you said, it's interesting where in the rise of Netflix, where it's kind of growing, Tubi, like you said, it kind of grew out of that, I don't want to say primordial stew of like the low budget streamers, but it managed to become this thing that I don't think I certainly wasn't expecting it to be.
Yeah, and I think the cool thing with Tubi is that, like Prime before, not so much like Netflix streaming, but like I think there is something for everybody. And they cater to a lot of different demographics. There's a lot of different rabbit holes you can go down, and it's kind of interesting. Downstairs in our living room TV, we don't I'm not, for whatever reason, I'm not signed in on Tubi, so it has an entirely different algorithm, which is nice
Yeah.
because it's stuff that my wife and my daughter watches. But upstairs, like it's all me. It's all Grindhouse, weird stuff, and then like I can go downstairs and find something that I would never be able to find upstairs because my algorithm is just too niche right now. So it is cool to just or either start multiple accounts and just kind of mine one genre or something, and it's kind of interesting what'll pop up and what won't pop up.
No, that's a great point too, because yeah, with Netflix, I mean, yeah, Netflix has a very vast catalog as well. But you kind of with Netflix, they'll do some algorithmic moving around and kind of, giving you things based off stuff that you've seen before. But then also because of all of their own productions, they're really pushing those as well. That, when you log on, they want you to know that, hey, we've got another, Chris Hemsworth movie or something like that we want you to check out, or, another season of a TV show that we've created. And so it is, that's one thing that Tubi, even though Tubi has their own original movies, they're really more ones that Tubi distributes in a way. They're not ones that Tubi is producing on their own. And so there isn't quite the same impetus for them to push those on you the way that Netflix does.
Right, and it's kind of like you said, like Netflix, they're pushing so many, and they have so many uh, you know, shows and original movies that when you're trying to find something, you have to go through 20 or 30 of these things before you start getting to like the other studio stuff. Whereas Tubi, it might be like 7 or 8 kind of Tubi originals, and then you can start finding, some stuff. But I mean, even uh, and it's funny because the Tubi originals are almost becoming a brand unto itself now because
Yes.
like it's almost kind of like what the Lifetime movies were like in like the early 2000s. They just kind of like uh just kind of really kind of pitch perfect like trash TV. And that might be a month long where I movie watching thing down the road where I do all the Tubi originals because the ones I've seen, or at least seen the thumbnails of, they look pretty priceless.
They do. They're almost like R-rated Lifetime. I know, like Rich Pierce, who did Sector 4 Extraction, who writes Lifetime movies. He's had a couple of his movies go straight to Tubi as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like that off brand of an off brand. It's like
Yeah.
the Mountain Lion to the Mountain Dew, but there's also like the Lightning Lion or what are the Mountain
Yes.
Lightning or whatever. So it's like it's always like what wheelhouse you're in, but
Right.
it's probably the taste probably isn't quite aligned there.
Exactly, exactly. Now, I'm kind of curious to see what you think of my idea of sort of the niche that Netflix is filling here with a movie like the one we're going to talk about today, Subservience. I felt like Subservience is the kind of movie that, like, maybe in the 80s or 90s, it would have gotten a theatrical run. Maybe becomes a cult classic, or like in the 90s in particular, it becomes maybe like what becomes the TNT new classics. So like it's kind of like played in the early, the late 90s, early 2000s on TNT between like Armageddon and say, I don't know, Shawshank Redemption or something like that. Um, and then in the 2000s, this probably would have been like a limited release Lionsgate kind of movie that gets in the theater, makes 20, 30 million, and then tries to do its damage on the secondary market. But now it's like it's a straight to Netflix thing. Like there isn't a place for a limited release theatrically for a movie like this. And that's where Netflix is sort of filling the boat where this wouldn't have been direct to video in any other era, but now it technically is because it's direct to Netflix. I don't know what your thoughts were on that.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because one of my talking points would have been like, uh, the subservience exact kind of movie that like yeah, we're children of the 90s. Like you would come home at like 3:15 from high school and like Subservience would be on and you would watch it because it's on. But then the next week it would be on again and you'd watch it again. You might see the parts that you missed or whatever, but it would become this movie that feels like it would always be on, and you would like no matter what you'd be doing, you would kind of have to be drawn into it. Because what I found, like I kind of picked this movie up as a lark because it kind of looked like it might be something to goof on or what, but it wound up actually being surprisingly well done, and I really enjoyed it. And I think it's one of those movies that really would slip through the cracks ordinarily, especially the way that its releases now. But I feel like you said, this would be a movie that you would catch like in the afternoon on TNT or something, and it would be a perfectly entertaining afternoon movie.
Yeah, it's the kind of movie, like you said, think about coming out in the 90s, that when VH1 does their I Love the 90s, it wouldn't have probably been in the first run of I Love the 90s, but like the part two, right? You'd get like, Michael Ian Black or somebody joking about Subservience coming out in 1996 or something like that, and I don't know who, I was trying to think of who the actor would be instead of Megan Fox. And I think another point we'll probably get to is her performance here, because I was trying to think of who would have done this in the 90s, who would have played this part. And I couldn't think of, maybe Shannon Doherty, I guess, right? Maybe that's who. um,
Natasha Henstridge or yeah.
yes, yeah, somebody, yeah, and that's what, but that's the kind of movie it would have been, like you said, like those TNT new classics. I mean, Shawshank Redemption. I don't know if I've ever seen that movie front to back before. I've always just, in college or in high school, I think it was definitely college when it came out, on TNT News New Classics. I remember on Saturdays, you're getting ready to do stuff and it would be on, and I'd watch like maybe the middle 30 minutes of it, and another time I'd watch the beginning of it before we go out to do something. Yeah, that's the kind of, like you said, you get home and you're getting ready to go out see your friends, or you're doing your homework or whatever it is you're doing when you get home from school. Subservience is on, and maybe it's like the middle to the end of it. And you watch it just because it's on. Yeah, it kind of has that kind of feel.
Yeah, and it's it does have some pretty good surprises in it, but not so much. They don't pull the rug out from under you. It's just like kind of like the this sly way they kind of present an old cliche where it doesn't feel so cliche. And I think it's one of those movies where you could watch it, sit down, go get yourself a drink, come back, and be fairly confident you haven't missed anything earth shattering, but you're still and even if you did, you're still moderately entertained, and you can fill in the pieces later.
Yeah, no, I totally agree on that. And now I should let people know that when we start getting stuck in on this movie, there are going to be spoilers, because there's no way we can really discuss this movie without the spoilers. And though the funny thing is, and I guess we'll talk about this, when we start getting in on the film, is that the first spoiler I think comes very at the very beginning. So this first spoiler actually comes, when you read the synopsis on Netflix and IMDb and stuff for it. It's kind of the first spoiler that they kind of spoil part of the movie. But well, I know I'm teasing that right now. We'll talk about that in a second. But before we get to the film, I wanted to talk about Megan Fox's performance and what you thought of that.
I thought she was excellent, and like I think it would be very lazy and kind of like a cheap jab to be like, oh yeah, we need a sexy human robot. Let's get Megan Fox, and like that's when I first saw it. Like I was like that was kind of my first thought, but she actually does some pretty interesting stuff with her like mannerisms and her body language. And it, so many of these movies like where an actor is supposed to be playing a flesh and blood, or not flesh and blood, but very close to being human automaton, you always know that they are playing, it's an actor. But there were times where you're like, you kind of have to look this, like she does like the whole kind of head tilt, kind of waits 2 seconds to speak, like she's processing things. She does it so well that like you actually buy her as a robot.
Yeah, I agree completely. I was expecting, like you said, like something kind of like what we've been used to, the tradition of this kind of movie. I was expecting that same thing, but she brings an edge to this, but also, like you said, a depth to it that you just weren't expecting. Like I said, the mannerisms were there, the way she communicates things, but also communicates in this way that, like you said, it's like a robot, but yeah, a robot who's sort of maybe you know, savvier about what's going on around her than the other people that are around her. It's really really amazing. I was not expecting that. I was, like you said, I was expecting just that like, I don't know, maybe not something as bad as like Small Wonder or something like that, but I was expecting something not as elevated as we got here.
Right, and it was a pleasant surprise, and that goes back to like those movies that would always be kind of playing on HBO or TNT. They were always these kind of like PG-13, kind of slightly more edgier entertainment than you would see, earlier in the day. But it was always something like, I remember The Wraith was always like a classic 3:15 movie, coming home from school. And that movie, it's like, yeah, like you could explain what happens in The Wraith, and people would just give you an odd look, like, okay, but like it's actually better than what you would think it would be, a Charlie Sheen motorcycle or hot rod racing alien, like it's
Right.
right. It was one of those movies where like that was where my head went to. It was like, this is like the 2024 version of The Wraith, of like, just something that you would watch and like watch probably 15 times, and it would just kind of get into your consciousness.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I think the writing on this too. I was surprised at how well the writing was. I think the very end of it, it kind of is the traditional kind of ending you get from a movie like this, where things just kind of get out of control and it's just all over the top. And I almost feel like that might be the Millennium producers. Boaz and was it Boaz Davidson and Avi Lerner probably were just like, it needs to be bigger. It needs to be bigger. Because I think they could have ended it earlier before they even got to that big end because of how well it was written before that. But it's almost like you can't make a movie like this without doing like this big, car chases or car explosions and all that kind of stuff. But I thought they played on themes like Fatal Attraction, but did it really, really creatively in a way that wasn't just like, we're just going to pull, scene for scene different shots from Fatal Attraction. Things like that like, towards the end of the movie, you can almost like hear Megan Fox saying, "I will not be ignored." It has that kind of feel to it.
Yeah, and another one that kind of has echoes of is The Hand That Rocks the Cradle.
Yes.
And it almost feels like it would be kind of like in that genre, like it's like an AI powered Rebecca De Mornay in that.
Yes.
But like, yeah, it's just very like uh just like basically, like I said, in this movie, you pretty much know what's going to happen, beginning, middle, and end. But it's the way that it happens and the way that they kind of present the material. It's just it was always a little bit better than it needed to be. Like, we don't need an AI sex bot Megan Fox movie to be great, but this flirted with greatness at certain parts.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I completely agree. Well, why don't we get stuck in a little bit here? And I think the opening part actually, where is probably where I was first thrown off the most. And I don't know if you got the same sense from me. It's what happened here, but the opening scene, we get introduced to the father, the mother, and the two kids. So the one child is in elementary school, the daughter, and then there's a son who's like maybe like one or two. Is maybe I think he's like one, because he's not speaking yet, but he can stand up. And this nice family home life. Everybody's relaxing, doing stuff, and then suddenly the mom has a heart attack. And I don't know about you, but I thought she died there. Was that the sense that you got?
Yeah, well, and that was another interesting way that they kind of did it, where she wasn't in the picture for a while,
Right.
and you see the dad at home alone with the kids and kind of really struggling, and then they bring her on a little bit later, but then yeah, it was like one of those things where I think they were really just trying to play up his isolation and his need for a robot nanny around the house.
Well, because it plays up that point, but I think it also plays up him as not the most sympathetic character, right?
Right.
Um, because to give people a sense of what happens is after that happens, like you said, we get the scene where he's struggling with his daughter and with his son. The son's, he's trying to do work stuff. The dad, he's like a foreman on construction sites. I got the sense that he wasn't an architect, but maybe like a contractor. That he worked on plans and things like that, and then managed the workers. But yeah, he's struggling, so he goes to what is essentially like a mattress warehouse or something, but they sell AI robots. It's like a department store or something. And the whole idea is that yeah, he's kind of walking around, and then the daughter disappears while he's getting all of the specs on what the robot can do, all the different things it can do, and the daughter disappears, and she's found by a Megan Fox robot. And so the dad's like, okay, well, she's like, oh, can we keep her? The daughter, she's like, can we keep her? And the dad's like, yeah, sure, okay. Which is a key plot point that comes later, because again, we're thinking the dad, at least thinking this idea that the dad has lost his wife. There'd be more of an impetus to have a hot chick for your robot made if you think you've lost your wife and you're lonely. And then when he gets home, he does another thing that I think being married, and I think you might be able to attest to this as well, that when Megan Fox, she says to him, because Megan Fox essentially she just comes to the house, she just shows up, and then he's like getting things set up with her, and she says, okay, well, you need to set the primary user. How many, or is it just you for primary user or anybody else? And he goes, no, just me. And I don't know about you, Mitch, but like if my wife is still in the picture, I'm thinking she's also going to be a primary user, right?
Yeah. That like you said, it is dropping breadcrumbs that he's not the most sympathetic guy. I mean, he's obviously we think he's kind of grieving at that point, but yeah. But to just quickly rewind a little bit, the part where he goes to pick out uh the Megan Fox doll. That was like my first kind of like genuine surprise. Like the way that they presented the store, where it was just this mundane IKEA, but for robots, and that everybody accepts a robot as we would uh, an iRobot, the Roomba or whatever. And like they had like the little sections where like the one was doing the cooking in the kitchen, then they had like the one vacuuming where you could see each of the different models at work, and it was just the way that it was just so nonchalant about it was a very kind of like we've seen stuff like that before, but it was presented in such like an offhand way that I was like, oh, okay, that was a really cool way to kind of introduce this technology without it. A lot of movies would have felt the need to have him like watch TV and there would be some commercial about these life-changing robots that can help you with all that. You know what I mean? Where it was just like just kind of going to the store to grab a few things. Oh, we'll get a Megan Fox robot while we're at it. Throw her in.
No, you're absolutely correct because it's like going to buy a mattress, right? Like if a character in a movie was going to buy a mattress, they wouldn't watch some fancy commercial about the mattress, right? They would just go and it would be like kind of one of those things like think about like going back to those 90s indie flicks, right? Be some kind of like guy in a leisure suit or something selling the mattress. And like you said, you got like the slick salesperson with his tablet kind of thumbing through things, and then like you said, people just kind of wandering around picking something out, and they're making this purchase. It is to your point, it even like buying a car, I think would be more of an investment than buying the robot, which is a huge deal considering what these robots can do.
Yeah, and it was, and there are things that we'll talk about later where you see like the other side of that, how other people feel about the automatons kind of in the workplace and kind of even like in serving drinks at bars, and just because it gets to a certain point about three-quarters of the way through, like you're not really entirely sure who around kind of as background extras or whatever is a robot or not. Be right, like how you know uh insulated in society are these things?
Right, because when you start off early on, right, you think it's just like Megan Fox is there, she's talking to the main to the dad, she's meeting the kids, and the dad is giving her instructions on things he wants her to do, and the first thing she says, right, is like, "Oh, I can drive the kids to school," and he's not comfortable with that. He's like, "No, no, I'll do that. Why don't you clean up and do whatever?" And so that's the first thought that tells you, like, well, maybe these robots aren't as safe because he's nervous about the idea of her driving the kids to school. Later, of course, he's okay with it, but that gives you a sense that maybe not everybody is as comfortable with this. But as the movie goes on, you see that that's actually not the case.
Yeah, and I think the big moment, which I kind of got a laugh out of it because, like I said, at first I thought I was going to kind of have like a Mystery Science Theater kind of time with this,
Yes.
and but very quickly I was like, no, this is actually legitimately like you know B plus A minus little sci-fi movie, but like the scene where he wants her to watch Casablanca, and
Yes.
she says, "Well, I know it because and she's listing like the IMDb credits, and he goes, "No, you have to experience it." So he reprograms her, and that was kind of like the first sign of trouble that
Right.
because she's like at the base factory settings or whatever at that point. But I was like, yeah, one of my things is like, oh my god, the film bro is going to be the end of us.
Right.
He's he's reprogramming her so he could tell her all about how great Humphrey Bogart is. But like it wasn't like that. But like that was like my first thought. I was like, God damn, Phil Bro.
Right, exactly. There's so much that this guy does that just kind of screws things up that you're just like, yeah, it kind of happens throughout the movie. I mean, I counted at least three deaths attributed to him. But we will definitely, I mean, you're right, because the Casablanca scene, well, yeah, I guess, the right before that, we get the scene where he's at his job and the company that's wanting this work done or whatever, it's discovered that they're hiring robot laborers to come in and wipe out the labor force, but they want this guy to keep his job. And so that's like our first kind of scene of like kind of the bad side of the robots is taking people's jobs. But this guy gets to keep his job. And that was like kind of an interesting sequence because he's guilty about it. It causes him to drink and those kinds of things. But by the same token, obviously with his wife being in the hospital, he needed to keep his job for his health insurance. They don't really mention that necessarily, but you assume that's probably what it is. Plus, they needed the money for all of that. But it is interesting because he does initially say, "Oh, I'm going to walk out. If you get all robots, I'm going to walk out." And the guy who's like running things is like, "Listen, I went to bat for you to keep your job here. Come on, what and it doesn't really take much to convince him to stay. Like he doesn't really like stand on principle for too long there, which is again kind of another sign of this guy.
Yeah, and it was interesting. Like he's not necessarily, quote unquote, a bad guy. He's flawed, and that was
Right.
interesting. That was like you could see he would do all this stuff that would royally piss his wife off, even like when she's sick in the hospital. But also, like you can see why she would kind of stay with him too,
Yeah.
because he's flawed. He's just a middle aged married guy with uh, hot Megan Fox robot around the house, and I mean we, yeah, when that combination, eventually you're going to get some 50 Shades of AI robot action
Exactly.
eventually.
Exactly. Yeah, because I think that now there's a Casablanca scene. Does that happen after she cuts herself and she has to go? She's in the bathroom, like pulling the piece of glass out, and he sees her in her underwear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was a well done scene too because one it shows how fast they can heal,
Yeah.
but also where she doesn't it seems very innocent enough with
Yeah.
her being in like a flimsy negligee, and where you would think, oh well, a robot wouldn't even think about that, but then as we see later on when she starts wearing the wife's clothes too, where it like you said, she becomes almost like the bunny boiler in Fatal Attraction, where
Right.
she's trying to keep her man basically, and under the pretense of keeping his stress levels low. I always like that because I had to crack up because it's like, your stress levels are high. Let me lower them, and she like puts her hand in his pants.
Right,
And I was like,
right.
whoa! I was like, okay, I don't know if that's in the IKEA agreement there. Like,
Exactly, exactly. And to your point too about him like reprogramming her, telling her to like remove things from her data that like allows her to essentially control her own brain more. Uh, it's almost like one of those things. Like at my job, I work with a bunch of different online systems, and people will request changes for them, and it's like, well, we need to test the changes out first because we don't know the cascading effects on that. But I guess with these robots here, maybe somebody didn't beta test that part of it, right? They didn't say like, well, what happens if a film bro happens to get one of these and starts to wipe out their memories because he doesn't like the files that are in their system that tell them about the movie, right? It's like, no, you got that all wrong. Let me tell you about the movie. It's like, yeah, it causes this crazy cascading effect. Now, the next day is when we find out that the wife is actually not dead. So they go to the hospital. They bring Megan Fox with them. She takes the baby with them, and the wife says to the husband like, "Huh, I thought you were getting an old English butler."
which is funny because and later in the movie we actually see an old English butler
Yes, exactly.
model, like kind of just out and about, and they were
Right.
like, yeah, he probably we wouldn't have a movie then.
No, no, exactly. And the husband's response, of course, is, "Well, the daughter wanted her," which is the best ever.
Of
It,
course, yes.
did you ever hear the story about Bruce Penhall and on Dallas when he was doing Dallas Connection? And I think it's in the IMDb trivia that I guess Julie K. Smith really wanted to ramp up the love scene. She really wanted to go for it, and Penhall's like, "Sure, I'll go for it too." And I guess Penhall's wife was not happy, and he was like, "But we were just getting into character," and she was like, "Nope." And I think that was the last Sidars movie he made. I don't think he made another one after that. So it's like the same idea, just get into the character. The daughter wanted it, and the wife's like, "Okay, fine."
Yeah, and it's one of those things too where we start seeing a little bit more of the wife that again there's like these very interesting kind of it's just the way that the information is parceled out as like many movies would just said, here's the score, this is what happens, boom. And once you're in the hospital you get a sense that there's a scene where the doctor's concerned because that her life-saving surgery isn't going to be able to happen because of a plane that's supposed to land, and you're like, what does that have to do with anything? And then later you find out why, and it's kind of like it's probably the creepiest scene in the movie. It's when she actually has her surgery,
Yeah.
and it's just these faceless, mouthless robo surgeons performing the surgery on her, and it was just like one of those things where I was like, that scene didn't need to be there, but I'm glad it is because it just shows like just kind of how warped this society kind of really is. It kind of like peels back the curtain about like what it really says about our dependency on these robots.
Right, right, because they have no mouths, I guess, because I know they said Megan Fox's character says early on that she uses ultraviolet light to kill bacteria in her mouth. But I guess, right, because the way doctors would have to wear a mask to cover any bacteria from getting into the body, they just don't have mouths. They don't need them. And there was something like very Philip K. Dick about it, right? It's like you've got all these fatal attraction moments, like you said, like the wife goes away and Michael Douglas has his affair. In this case, it's the wife disappears and they we suddenly get her back. But here we're getting some kind of Philip K. Dick kind of, Steven Spielberg, renditions of Philip K. Dick kind of, darkness here that was really interesting.
Yeah, and like I said, it was just the way, like the offhanded way it was kind of presented. It wasn't like, uh, it was like this is the world that these characters live in. We're just gonna present it the way that they would just kind of experience it, and it was just, and for us, who are slowly kind of getting these breadcrumbs about how real, how this version of the world works. It was really well done, I thought.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, now we get a couple, like you said, we get these sort of like sexual tension moments with Megan Fox where there's a point, like you said, where she notices he's nervous about something and she goes and reaches down to his pants and says, oh, I can make you calmer. I can make your blood pressure go down. And he's like, no, I'm not ready for, I don't want to do that or whatever. And then he goes out with the his old crew who have all been laid off, goes out and gets drinks with them, which I don't even know if I would do that. That just does not seem like a good idea, especially based on the circumstances. But he does it anyway. And at one point, this character who kind of was like the foreman, or I guess he was like another kind of lead guy in the group. He's played by am I looking at the yeah? So played by Andrew Whipp. The character's name is Monty. He and some of the other crew, they go to the construction site to destroy some of the robots. He makes it sound like he's going to get his tools because they locked his tools, which of course he could have just asked the main character to pick them up. But anyway, he goes. The interesting thing about this scene, I don't know what your thoughts were. I mean, we live in the current age, so we're not even into the future yet, where all of these AI robots and stuff exist. But in our current age, there are cameras everywhere. I don't think you could pass a construction site and not be on film. But the idea that there wasn't a camera watching what everybody was doing here would kind of blew my mind.
Yeah, I think that was like one of those kind of convenient kind of things. And even to the point of the robot itself, I would have thought would have a camera
Yeah.
installed in it. But I think that scene was mostly there to show that, it was almost kind of uh, like a these characters that are anti-technology. It was almost like committing a hate crime
Yeah.
in a way. Like it was almost like he's a racist for because he took his job, and he wants a little payback. And yeah, like what and the fact that our hero is complicit in all this and he lets it happen, again, just not another good decision for our lead character.
Yeah, no, exactly. But he comes home drunk and with a very elevated heart rate. And so Megan Fox, or I should say, her name's Alice, based off the Alice in Wonderland book. That's where the daughter names her Alice. But Megan Fox, the Alice the robot, when she notices that her owner is in this elevated heart rate state, and he's definitely got some stress, she comes up with an idea because again, he says he doesn't want to cheat on his wife, so she blindfolds him and then mimics the wife's voice, and they have sex. And for Nick, the main character, that was okay for him. That worked for him. I mean, he definitely later on felt guilty about it. He does try to equivocate about it later, but it happens. We've got the sex scene happens, and so he has officially cheated on his wife with the sex robot, and so the all of that, those initial breadcrumbs that we've gotten throughout the movie, they finally pay off here.
Yeah, and I'm glad you reiterated that her name Alice was based on Alice in Wonderland and not Alice the housekeeper from Brady Bunch.
Exactly, exactly, because she does kind of have a sexier Alice from the Brady Bunch outfit on, doesn't she?
Yeah, I mean, like the factory setting thing, and then eventually, she starts kind of thinking for herself, kind of,
Yeah.
and starts, uh, dressing for herself. But yeah, it was, like that was another like little like kind of like quip I was thinking in my head. But then, like, yeah, it's like once the movie revealed itself to be actually, a really good movie, then I was like, okay, I'll just quit quit quipping about it.
Right, exactly. And we get some other breadcrumbs, like the baby crying, not wanting the baby crying to upset the husband. And so she does something where she's kind of holding on his heart rate. And oh, I forgot, that's right. That moment where she put her hand in his pants. He felt her heart rate. That they have like a fake version of a heart rate because babies respond to a mother's heart rate. I'd forgotten about that was the other moment that they had. So it made him feel like, like you said, as a film bro, it made him feel like he had a real connection with her, that he felt her heart rate, not just that he wanted to get laid. So there was that as well there. But we get these breadcrumbs that something might happen with the baby, that there's that. We are, again, like you said, the wife, she has her surgery. She's now coming home. And so there's that tension there as well, that now the wife is sort of trying to reassert herself. There's almost this like rare kind of thing going on between them, which is really interesting, especially over the lasagna. So the daughter really likes the mom's lasagna, and Alice, Megan Fox was never able to replicate it properly, and now the mom makes it for the daughter, and Megan Fox is like, well, if you gave me the recipe, she's like, sorry, family secret. It's like they're all kind of you kind of feel bad for Alice there, right? Because it seems like she's kind of getting left out of things, and now that the mom is giving her a hard time, it's even worse.
Yeah, and there are several junctions where you're like you almost kind of feel bad for Alice because she's just doing her job and she doesn't really understand that like when the daughter her mom's in the hospital and she wants someone to read to her, so to comfort her, Alice will speak in her mother's voice while she's reading a story because it reminds her of her mother. But when the dad sees it, it just reminds him of the time that she spoke in in his wife's voice to have sex with him. So he's like, "Don't ever do that again." And then she's like, "What?" She's just like it comforts her, like she's trying. We see both sides of kind of hey the robot chick is just trying to do her job, man.
Right, right, exactly. And there's also, I think one of the things people forget the most about Fatal Attraction is how bad Michael Douglas's character is in that movie. And right from the beginning, he has this great affair with Glenn Close while his wife's out of town, and then suddenly just tries to just dump her, just completely X her out of his life, completely as if, like as if nothing happened or nothing was there. And it's kind of the same thing with Megan Fox's character, that it's almost like, oh, now that mom's back, all of these things are, it's like, okay, fine, we don't really need Megan Fox here. We don't need Alice anymore. And she's trying to kind of assert herself. And she's like, almost like, my whole purpose is to make Nick happy. And people seem to be getting in the way of it, but I need to keep working on that.
Right, and it's that fact that people are getting in the way of
Yeah.
his happiness that she might have to start cutting some family ties as we
Exactly, exactly.
as we say. But like yeah, it's a very interesting where uh because he did that little reset, like her main programming function now is his happiness, and if the baby's crying was well that doesn't make him happy, and like she just starts taking things to the extreme, which is always kind of fun in these robot movies, where the AI is a little bit more sinister than like we would hoped it to be if we were the primary user.
Exactly. Well, because we get the real plot point when she is taking the kids to the park, and there's another kid who's there, like angry and complaining to his British butler robot. So this is the British butler guy, right? Who is I want to say he's like a guy who's been in a lot of like these Bulgarian low budget productions. I think he's a Bulgarian actor, and I think he's been in like some Seagal movies and things like that. So he's someone that he's been around, and he's the British butler. And Megan Fox is like, well, you need to get your kid to stop it because it's upsetting the baby, and your kid is upsetting my baby by yelling like this, and I need you to stop. And he's like, what am I supposed to do? So she leans down and says to the kid, you better shut up and just go play or whatever, and then when the kid runs off, the butler's like, I guess your master kind of lowered your what do you say, your etiquette protocols. And she's like, no, actually, I was able to reset it myself. And so it's like, okay, that's when we first know that she's got more control over herself than the other ones do.
And not only that, there's like the whole lineup of nannies that are watching
Yes.
their kids, and they all, rack focus to her. Like, I
Yes.
want to learn how to do that too. And
Right.
that's when you get this kind of sense that like this might be like one of those Skynet Terminator. Are we going to like a Skynet Terminator kind of thing
Right.
with Megan Fox kind of like leading the resistance kind of thing? That again, that was like another thing where like I wouldn't have been surprised if that happened in the movie, but like the way that it happened, it was just like all the nannies at the park. That was just a very interesting choice to like parcel out that little breadcrumb. It was just, and like I said, that shot of like the nannies, like like it made me like audibly laugh because I was like oh shit, like because there is this class kind of thing too that kind of bubbles up too, where they're just like second class citizens, and people abrasive to them, and they're just doing their job. And at some point, where's the tipping point where the robots have had enough of their human, you just being a total dickhead to them.
Right. No, no, you're absolutely correct. And it's one of those things where it's like there's this sense of like, well, they're robots. You can talk to them however you want. And obviously for us knowing that they're not robots, it's a little bit harder to watch, right? You're like, oh, how can you be so rude to poor Alice or to the to the other ones? And yeah, when you see that response there, the other thing too about that playground, it reminded me a lot of the original the opening store that they go to, and sort of the kind of the mundaneness of it, but also sort of like the kind of the dreary look to it. It just it kind of just kind of drove home this sort of this dreary future that we see here. And like you said, there's that class thing going on where you've got these spoiled rich kids that are yelling at the robots, and here's one robot who's sort of taking a stand, which was really cool.
And also, too, you didn't see any parents at the
Right.
park. They were all nannies or butlers, and that
Yeah.
was like another kind of dystopian kind of thing. Like, like where are the parents in all this? And I mean, like we see, Nick, our main character, at work, but he doesn't do much. So it's like are the humans becoming more and more obsolete as the story progresses?
Right. Well, it's almost too like a like we joke about, sort of like the 70s and 80s parents, kids being latchkey kids, where it's sort of like they just are out, running around, doing. I mean, I always remember as a kid going to Chuck E. Cheese in the 80s where they had the big room with the Elvis the lion Elvis impersonator. And that's where the parents, they drank and smoked and all of that. And it's like, if you need to get more tokens, you'd go in and, my dad would be like having a cigarette out of his mouth and, like digging, change it. But it was more like you were interrupting something, right? That the parents and their kind of their bacchanalia that they were doing it there, you were interrupting it, and it's almost like a similar thing here, where it's like parents, like kids are almost an inconvenience. It's like they're nice, they're fun, but when you don't want them around, and I guess that is part of from the rich person standpoint, right? That you have the nanny who just when the kids are an inconvenience, the nanny deals with them, and I guess it's a similar vibe there.
And when another kind of interesting thing that kind of makes that pendulum swing a little bit further is Nick's friend who uh, damages the robot worker. But when Nick goes to visit him at his home, we learn that he too, they're called sparks. That's like
Right.
the slur for the automaton workers, and he too has one, but it's almost like he uses it as a domestic violence suit, and we see her with scars, and he like basically just uses her as a punching bag. And that's like another way that we see that she's these robots are really kind of treated horribly.
Right, because it's almost like because we found out his wife leaves him, and it's almost like he's taking it out on her. And you wonder too, because on the one hand, they make it seem like these robots are only for rich people, but you wonder if in his case, because he was out of work, right? So where would he find the money to be able to get this? If maybe it was like you could buy them on credit, like you can a lot of things. And so you just kind of put a down payment, and you've got the robot, and then you've got to make payments every month. So yeah, maybe, but that's you're right. There was another kind of bad way that the robot was being used.
And then, of course, when you know uh, he threatens to go to the cops and to tell them that Nick was the one that was with him, and basically going to get him fired, because if he's fired, that will affect Nick's happiness. So uh, Alice has to go and take care of him, and we get this like kind of almost touching scene between Alice and the friends automaton worker, where she tries to fight her off, and she's like, I'm just protecting my human, and she's like, so am I, and she kills him.
Right.
She kills her, and it's like this kind of like it's just like I said, it was just more textured and layered than I that you would expect a Megan Fox robot movie on Netflix to be.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And so, yeah, so for people that to give you a sense of what happens is that this guy Monty, he shows up, he's been arrested for destroying the robots, and he is saying he's not going to rat on anybody, but he's telling Nick to go to his boss and drop the charges, otherwise he will rat on Nick. And they fight for a bit, and Megan Fox comes out while they're fighting. He goes to smash a beer bottle over Nick's head, and Megan Fox grabs the beer bottle, the hand, and smashes it so it cuts his hand. And then she does like this move where she kind of does like the forward thrust and it knocks him forward. I'm trying to think of other movies that have done that. So I mean, it's kind of like the using the force, right? Only she's touching them when she hits them. And but then yeah, she goes to his house later, grabs his gun, and but yeah, before she kills him, her his we see his servant, and she's got scars on her face and stuff, and she's like trying to stop Megan Fox thing, but you can see like there's like tension in her voice when she says it. Like she doesn't want to say, "I have to protect my human, or my user." But yeah, that Megan Fox kills her. So we get this moment here, and Nick is still worried about what's going to happen. He doesn't know that this guy has been killed, and then he finds out when he goes to work the next day that yeah, don't worry about it. The guy's dead. You don't have to. You don't have. And then I think doesn't the boss say like you need to take some time or something like that. Because of what happens. But at the same time, we get some really interesting stuff here. We get the moment where Madeline or Maggie, the wife, finds out about the sex. That Alice has had sex with Nick. She's in the bathtub, and the first thing that happens, right, is that Megan Fox is standing there watching her in the bathtub, and she's like, "Well, can you not watch me?" She's like, "Well, a lot of people die in the bathtub," and she's like, "I'll be careful." She's like, "But if you died, it would really make Nick stressed out. We don't want that." She's like, "Okay, I guess yeah, that would be the worst thing that would happen if I died, right?"
Yeah, and like I said, it was the language that she always used was like stress, and it was always like you could tell like the coding was just very basic when they made her, or whether when she's when he flips something over. So it's just she uses the same kind of phrases over and over like to really hammer home that she's just doing what she's been programmed to do. And I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. And so now she broaches a subject that as a human, you definitely would not broach. But Alice broaches it because she's a robot and she feels very comfortable. She says to the wife, listen, the whole heart surgery thing is really hard for you to kind of maintain your stamina. And I feel like you can't really do for Nick in the bedroom what he needs right now. So I'm offering to be your surrogate. I will have sex with Nick for you to keep Nick happy. And the wife's like, no, I don't. That's not going to work. You're really asking me if you can have sex with my husband for me, because I can't do it. And she goes, well, I know that it keeps his heart rate low. And she goes, how do you know it keeps his heart rate low? And so that's how she's figured it out. So she then tells Alice to go in the other room. So she's like essentially confined to like the outer porch area or whatever. And then Maggie confronts Nick, and Nick uses all of the great excuses, right? Like one of them was like it's not it's just like the same as you using your vibrator, which
That was probably the biggest laugh of the movie for me. It was just like it's like insert open mouth, insert foot.
exactly, exactly. And then the baby starts crying. And now this is, I think, to your point about how the fact that, you're seeing these robots at the park and there's no parents around. The mother, the wife is arguing with him about what happened and she's pissed and rightfully so, she should be pissed. But the baby's crying and she's like, oh, he's fine. Don't worry about it. It's like, well, no, you probably should go up and see what's going on with the baby. This argument between the two of you can wait until, you've seen if the baby's all right. So that's when Megan Fox jumps into action and she's like, oh, the baby's crying. It really upsets Nick. This is where we get probably the closest to our fatal attraction, boiling the rabbit scene, because she puts the baby in the bathtub and she's going to fill the bathtub with water. The daughter catches her doing it, goes to tell Nick. They run upstairs. She's blocking the door so Nick can't get in. So the wife does. This is also where the movie kind of gets a little bit out of control. Is the wife climbs up on the roof and goes through the window that way. And then when she goes to attack the wife, Nick is able to break through the door and get in. There's a tussle. They're kind of going back and forth, and eventually he attacks her with a lamp. And when she grabs the lamp, he plugs it in, or they turn it or whatever, and she gets electrocuted, and that's it. She's electrocuted, and end scene. Go to the next scene where kind of picking up the pieces there.
Yeah, and what was interesting with, like, I actually took a bathroom break on that part, and I looked and I was like, oh, the movie's almost over. I
Right.
just like, and I paused it and I was like, wait a minute, this still has a half hour left. I'm like,
Right.
what? Well, like, and there was like, oh snap, like we got more movie. It's like felt like the movie is like baseball. Like we're going into extra innings here. Like, and not in a bad way, because they're like, like, we say it all the time, like a movie really should be about 90 minutes, and you got to earn that extra, minute. But it really did, because it's not really that long. I think it's what 105 minutes, but probably 7 or 8 of that is credits. So
Yeah, I think it's
uh,
even more than that. I want to say the movie was like 135. I think it was like 10 minutes because it
yeah,
was like 7 of credits plus they have all those foreign language credits that Netflix has at the
right,
end too.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the point is there was at least a good 20 minutes, and where most movies would have just said, okay, call it a day. We had our little action sequence, but not Subservience.
No, no. Well, and I think from a writing standpoint, they could have gotten away with ending it there. I think they'd done such a good job to that point. But I think also too, I think from Millennium Films perspective, there needed to be a big ending. They needed to have a big finish here. So, but again, this big finish is the fault of Nick because a representative from the company is there and he wants to know what happened, what was wrong, and Nick doesn't want to talk to him. I got to talk to my wife. I got to do this. I got to do that. And it's like, no, no. If you had just told this guy what happened, like, hey, I'm a film bro. I told her to erase the memory things from, and he could have been like, what? You told her to what? And then he could have called ahead and said, quarantine her, don't do anything. But instead, he's like, no, I got to talk to my wife. I can't talk to you right now. And so 3 people end up dying as a result of this. The first 2 come in the next scene, right? Because they hook Megan Fox up to these 2 techs, hook her up to the system to try to figure out what's going on. And that's where all of this rewritten code that she's written for herself in her head starts to infect the whole computer system.
Yeah, and it was a really interesting scene too, because like they layer out on the, like, it looks like an autopsy table to us, but
Right.
for they're just kind of like doing a diagnostics on her, and it like they're both like, "Ah, when are they gonna like recall this model? Like they've had so many problems with this model anyway." And
Right.
it's like it was just like that one little kind of like nugget where you're like, oh, this is gonna end badly.
Yes.
Because they're like the tech, if the techies know this thing's a problem, the guys up at the top are the last to know.
Yes. Yeah, and we get the classic kind of 80s, 90s thriller of Megan Fox is in this kind of chair thing getting the diagnostics run, and we see her hand. And one of the techs notices a finger move, and he's like, what could that be? And then you think like, okay, maybe she's gonna stop before they pull the thing out of her head. But no, they pull the thing out of her head. And we're thinking like, okay, well, something bad is gonna happen here. How does it happen? And what ends up happening is that because she infects the system, another Megan Fox wakes up and takes care of business for her.
Yeah, it was a very kind of Skynet thing where they're pulling the wires out of the wall to try to stop it, and it was just kind of like the chef kiss. Like, you're
Yeah.
okay. This is how you do the extra 20 minutes of a movie. And it was good too, because then like you said, we get this other defective Megan Fox model, but this one has kind of like short blonde hair, and uh it was kind of like like an interesting kind of Terminator-esque kind of ending, to kind of put us the cherry on top.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we get is that we get the husband, of course, doesn't go with his family to the hospital because well, he kind of just he's the reason that they're there in the hospital. He's the reason why. So the wife doesn't really want to see him right then. So he's at the bar drinking his sorrows away, which of course he's got robot waiters that are waiting on him, and they're asking him like, hey, do you want Do you want to talk? Do you want to do whatever,
Girl
uh,
trouble.
right.
Yes.
Exactly. And he's like, get away from me, you spark. I don't want to talk. You sparks are everywhere, whatever. And then Megan Fox with her scarred face, because her character kind of gets, when she gets hit by things, when they're the tussle, her face gets scarred. She sits down across from him and he's got to figure his way out of this. But he realizes that there is another Megan Fox going to get his wife and kids at the hospital. And so he does manage, because we find out that she's able to shut down the other robots. Uh, I think that's what she does, right? She goes in and she kind of looks at them and is able to shut them down.
Right. Yeah. Because she had control of the system.
Yeah. And that's another breadcrumb we got at the very beginning of the film, right? It was when she first goes into the house and the husband and the kids leave. When she's first taking care of things, there's a whole list of things that they need to buy on the refrigerator. It's one of those deals where you can order things from Amazon or whatever on the refrigerator. She just looks at it and closes her eyes and everything is purchased. And so she has the ability to kind of, feed it, hook up to the internet, I guess, and can use the Wi-Fi to do this, and she shuts those down. But yeah. But yeah, so he tricks her. He kind of gets her to like trust him. He tricks her and then smashes her head and then runs off. At the same time, the other Megan Fox is, like you said, we're getting kind of our Terminator 2 end here, where she's sort of creeping around the hospital. The wife and daughter are hiding. Classic this kind of movie situation where we get a nurse who just shows up and it's like, well, hey, if you're not related to the family, you're not going to survive this as a nurse. Sorry, the family's important. We need to make sure they're all living. But yeah, poor nurse who's doing an overnight shift and just trying to see what's going on here. Yeah, you're done. Neck break. That's it. She's
That
out.
was that was that was a really interesting thing too, because she was human and like all
Yeah.
the doctors, all the higher ups were robots. And for her, because you're thinking like, because after the third or fourth trip to the hospital, you're like, okay, these are mostly all robots. And to just have like this sassy overnight nurse come in, you're like, oh crap, like she's so dead, like and it's like again, it was just like one of those fun kind of world building kind of things where like, oh yeah, they would get the nurses to all be humans. I don't know if all the real the real doctors are off playing golf, or the robot doctors are playing robot golf. I don't know where they were at
Right,
that
right,
point, but
exactly.
it was one of those kind of like just like little kind of really nice moments like the movie had like a lot of, where just the nurse comes around and like, oh yeah, she's human, she's dead.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you make a great point, because there's a lot of doctors that are robots that are there who all get shut down, right? They all,
Right.
she shuts them all down, but then the poor nurse, yeah, she's like, what's going on here? And then, yeah, it doesn't end well for her. But yeah, now we get kind of our big action finale, because, as the wife she's got the kids and she's trying to escape in an ambulance, and Megan Fox is able to shut off the car, and then the dad. One of the things I forgot to mention is the dad's been working on this car. He's been souping up this old car throughout the film. This, like, I think it's like a Dodge Charger.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. But it definitely a muscle car. He comes charging through and hits her with the car, and so that we get these big explosions. It's kind of like your big action finale that you didn't necessarily need for a movie like this, but I think it sort of it elevates, or it kind of enhances the guilty pleasure factor.
Yeah, and then you also have like the Terminator-esque kind of scene where she's like crawling through the rubble, and like, half of her face is Megan Fox, half of her face is a robot, and
Yeah.
it was just kind of like, they were honoring what you wanted to see from a Megan Fox AI robot movie while also giving you something maybe you didn't know that you needed.
Yeah, exactly. So, once everything is cleared up, and then they're back at the hospital because the dad got injured, so now he's in the hospital too. So it's like the whole family is hanging out at the hospital. They're all getting to know everybody there. I guess if there's robots working there, like maybe they've gotten, maybe they're we can have the whole problem happening again, right? Like, oh, Nick's back again. We got to make sure his heart rate doesn't go up. But they're kind of doing this whole happily ever after thing, which is interesting. I guess if you're, for the wife, it's like, at the first, he cheated on me. It's like within a span of like, like what, 8 hours, 10 hours, right? Her husband cheats on her and then saves her and the family's life. And so it's like, maybe he's not so bad, I guess. So maybe we'll go to marriage counseling.
Yeah, they might be robots too, so.
Right, exactly. Yes, right. Yes, That's a good point. Even thinking that the marriage counselors are robots, that would be great. But we also get, like you said, we get that Skynet moment at the end where that the guy, the representative from the company who had been talking to Nick earlier and didn't get any information, he's there investigating what happens, and they turn the computer back on and realize that, oh, we've restarted this whole thing again. And there's a sense that, like, yeah, there's going to be an army of Megan Foxes coming for us in Subservience 2.
Which might not be a bad thing.
Right, exactly. I mean, they could take this on a different. I mean, I guess the question is that, with Millennium Films doing this on the cheap in Bulgaria, and I don't know, I think IMDb, you don't always know if their budget numbers are accurate. They said the movie grossed $284,000 worldwide, so I'm assuming it must have gotten some. Some quick release, or I guess some limited releases some places, but it didn't say how much it cost to make the movie. I can't imagine. I guess if you're going to go that next level, it would probably be a higher budget.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to see if they chose to, what direction would they go? Would they do a big time jump where it's kind of like Terminator Salvation and it's all after Judgment Day, or would they pick it up immediately afterwards? Or there'd be a lot of interesting ways to kind of do the Megan Fox robot uprising.
Well, because you have the character of the daughter, Isla, and I love the idea of her being like a Sarah Connor character, right? Like if you go 20 years in the future, and she's leading the resistance against Megan Fox's robots.
Yeah, definitely. We could do that. Yeah, she's like, it's like, I fought one of these before. It's
right,
like,
yeah. Or if they find out, it's all her dad's fault, right? Like, like that's like a big reveal midway through. Wait a second, this is all your dad's fault? Well, I mean, he didn't really mean anything. No, that's like, yeah, you see him like in a nursing home with gray hair or something like that, and he's like, talking about like, have you ever seen Double Indemnity? And it's like, oh no,
Or they could have, Megan Fox like, like on a throne, and like she has like the humans are waiting on her and like doing her laundry and stuff, and a lot of places you could go with. Hopefully it would be like the second S would be in Subservience would be a 2, like they could do
Yes.
the sub 2 scenes, like
Oh,
I'd be down for
yes.
that. Yes.
Yeah. No, you could. 'Cause it's funny because they even show like the cover almost like it's almost like it's foreshadowing that, because it looks like an army,
Yeah.
sitting at attention. Yeah, of course it's the outfit too. Yeah, I mean this movie. It's like the way that they're selling it as a guilty pleasure, and it has many guilty pleasure elements, but there's just definitely things between the writing and Megan Fox's performance, and I think also too, I think some of the other performances, I think the wife, played by Madeline Zima, and Nick, the main character, who's an Italian actor, Michele Morone, they bring something to this movie that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, I think it was like he looked very much like the Great Value version of Oscar Isaac.
I was gonna say the same thing. Yes.
It like, because I don't know if they were trying to make us think Ex Machina when we saw that, like, like we're like, hey, our robot movie is just a little bit more than just a robot movie, like Ex Machina. Let's get a guy in there like that looks just like Oscar Isaac to remind everybody.
Yes. Well, because when I was thinking about that, about him looking like Oscar Isaac, is that had it been Oscar Isaac, he would have provided too much depth for this role. And I think having it being a poor man's Oscar Isaac, he doesn't bring that depth, so that when he does certain things like, say like, oh, yeah, I'm the only primary user, instead of being like, oh, my wife is in the hospital, she probably would like to be a primary user too. When he does things like that, or says like, having sex with her is like you using your vibrator. Like if Oscar Isaac, I don't know if I would believe it if he said it as much as I believed it when this guy said it.
Right. That is a good point. He, like I said, he towed the line of being just kind of just like a bad husband with just like a bad guy. Like he made, like, we all have bad weeks, and like whew, this guy had a bad week.
Right, exactly. But the thing is, you say like everybody has bad weeks. He set himself up for the bad week, though, right? Like he should have just gotten the old English butler. That's yeah,
But then
and
we would have a movie. We wouldn't
right,
be here, like
exactly.
we'd be like, hey, we're talking about Mr. Belvedere 2.0 in
Right.
this, on this podcast, Mr. Belvedere 2000.
Right, right, exactly. Right. We would be watching that and saying, like, how did they really stretched an hour and a half out of that movie? It's definitely not an hour and a half's worth of material. And Mr. I to be fair, I don't know how they got however many seasons of Mr. Belvedere out of Mr. Belvedere. So I guess
Well,
that's
Bob
a
Uecker, I mean, Bob Uecker was the glue that held that thing together. So
yeah, that's a good point. The only episode I remember is when Bob Uecker had lied to his son and said he was in the Korean War when he wasn't. Which in real life he would have been old enough to be in the Korean War, I think, but because he was playing somebody younger, he wasn't. And yeah, all the kids at school were making fun of his son because they were like, "What was your dad, 14 in the Korean War?" Something like that. So, for some reason, that's the only episode I remember.
yeah, I mean, it was basically just watered down family affair. Like you don't realize that when you're a kid, but then when they start playing family affair reruns right alongside it, you're like, wait a second, I've seen this
Right.
before.
Exactly, exactly. And I mean, I guess with this film, it is interesting how this film uses its source material, but like you said, it's not like just like a watered down version of its source material. That it's not like yeah, it's not like a Mr. Belvedere version of a Family Affair, but they take that that mix of Terminator 2 and Blade Runner with Fatal Attraction and even some of those like those other Philip K. Dick kind of vibes of Spielberg with like artificial intelligence and Minority Report. They put them together in a really, really I don't know, like really inspired way that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of times movies just come down to like their ingredients, and you can just see, oh, this is just uh, uh you and I think basically when I first saw this, like the on Netflix, like it was like the number one movie, and that
Right.
threw me on Netflix. I think when we were talking about it, I said, "What?" Like I just looked on Netflix, number one movie is Subservience, and I had to laugh. I'm like, that the Megan Fox robot movie, and I think that's what a lot of people think when they would see this on Netflix. But like I said, it's one of those movies where you actually caught yourself watching it, you would get caught up in it and invested in it, and it might even be a movie that you'd watch four, five, six times. And who knows, you might be picking up more stuff that was there that you didn't catch the first time.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think there's like little breadcrumbs that were coming up throughout this movie that there's definitely ones that probably, like maybe while I was like scrolling to find out who was playing the wife on IMDb because I thought it was like a lull in the film. I might have missed something happening in the background. Because yeah, there's a lot of like moving parts in this and a lot of pieces that the way that this is developed is a really, really really smart way that yeah you just like you said it wasn't required of this movie. This movie didn't have to be as smart as it was. Megan Fox didn't need to turn into the performance that she did, and we still would have probably had a fun time with it, but the fact that they did makes it so much better.
And I saw the director, S.K. Dale. He also did another Megan Fox movie, Till Death, which now I'm like, well, that's on my queue now because,
Right.
just based on this alone, like, yeah, like I'll definitely check out, another film of hers. And after Expendables, like she's like an honorary, she's not honorary, she is a member of the Expendables. So I think it's one of one of those actresses where her DTV career is gonna have to, I'm gonna have to step it up and start watching more of her. Where I watched, what was it, Prey, the one with her versus the lion, which was fine, but yeah, now I'm gonna have to start going deeper into her back catalog.
Right. Well, she has the one she did with that Bruce Willis, Midnight in the Switchgrass, which is
Right.
I think that's on different ones now. Like you said, Till Death. I didn't realize that was directed by the same guy because that one is also pretty prominent on Netflix, I believe.
Yeah, like, well, that, because I was like, wow, that was, well directed. I looked at it and it said that was his previous movie, and it looks like it's kind of like a riff on the that Tales from the Crypt episode with Kyle MacLachlan, where he gets handcuffed to the sheriff or whatever, and the sheriff's dead, And it looks like that kind of thing where Megan Fox gets handcuffed to her husband, and somebody's trying to kill him, and she kills him, or they kill him, but then they have to come after her, but she's trying to get away while she's handcuffed to her dead husband. So it looks pretty. I was like, that's enough to make me interested. So
Right, exactly. What was the other movie? The Stephen King story that was made into a movie, Gerald's Game. I think that was a Netflix original as well
yeah,
with Carla Gugino. I think yeah. So there's yeah, it's normally I would have looked at it as like, oh, this is just another Gerald's Game kind of take on it or something, and it looks, some of those things make me squeamish. Like the image of her is like her with the handcuff like hanging, and it's like kind of cutting into her wrist on the cover. So those kind of things make me look a little squeamish. But I think like you're right. Like after seeing her in this, I feel like I've got to give it another chance. I think I don't know that the issues with exportables or expendables. I don't know if her fitting or not fitting in that movie was that really her fault. I think there's a lot of things about that movie that were sautéed in wrong sauce. But I think fans of the Expendables kind of took it out on her a bit, maybe unnecessarily. And hopefully, any of them that have those kind of feelings, maybe they'll watch Subservience and have a different opinion of her.
yeah, and I mean, she's like any, you know, working actress. She has her hits and misses. She was really
Yeah,
good in Jennifer's Body
yeah,
when she was given like a pretty quirky character. Uh, and that was, again, that was a movie that's kind of trades on her looks and her images and her image, and gives you like a different side of that, which is I think what Subservience did well. Like I think everybody thought is like, oh, somebody saw Megan and said, hey, Megan Fox is a robot. Like,
yeah.
that might have been the kernel of the story or whatever, but the way that it was put together and presented was, anything but generic.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I haven't seen Megan yet. I've been meaning to, but it seems like Megan is more of like a child's play kind of horror movie. That's the sense that I got of it. Whereas this is definitely more of a Fatal Attraction type deal.
Right, yeah, but I mean, it was just one of those things where it's like, Megan Fox, and like it just seemed like one of those kind of like uh scenes in the play or whatever where they're pitching the movie. Like,
Right. Well, because a lot of what I was seeing online about people, when they were talking about this movie, that was the sense that they got, is that it was just a ripoff of Megan, and yeah, like you said, Megan Fox makes it all the more of a ripoff feel to it. So yeah, so I think for people that feel like this could be a ripoff of Megan, yeah. Even though it looks like it has that feel to it, it's not. It's you're definitely in for something different there.
yeah, it was definitely one of the better. I don't know if it's going to be on my top 10 list, but it was,
Yeah.
if I had like a little section for, pleasant surprises, this would be pretty near the top.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. Like this, again, this is the kind of movie. It had a limited theatrical release here in the States, but I think it's the kind of movie that, like, if you saw that it was going to be in the theater, you'd probably be like, "Well, why would they put that in the theater?" And direct to Netflix is probably a good place for it, but it's definitely going to give you something a little bit more. Like you said, it's a happy surprise kind of movie. IMDb's got it giving it a 5.4 out of 10, and I actually would say that that's actually probably a good, if you when you're looking on IMDb, I think if you get over 5 for a number on there, for especially for these kinds of movies that are lower budget, direct to streaming, direct to video, those kinds of things, if they go over 5, that means it's probably more like a 10 in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I kind of grade direct to video movies on a curve anyway, and this, the curve really wasn't needed for this one. This one
Yeah,
would have played well, I think, just as well, on the big screen with a big house.
yeah,
Would they have gotten the audience required for that? I don't know, but it's, I always say, good movies always find you. You don't find the good movies. So it's just like we've done how many of these episodes, and a lot of the movies we go into kind of thinking that they're just going to be goofy fun or accept it for what it is, whereas this one was like a genuine surprise, and it was just very well done, and you kind of want to see what everybody involved could do with maybe like a bigger budget, and just it's definitely one of those movies that it's gonna stick with you for a while.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's definitely, I think like you said, checking out the next, that the Till Death for for Megan Fox on Netflix. That's definitely on my list as well. I was, I'd probably go back and see some of her other back catalog movies. And again, I think Expendables or Expendables. It's sort of a that movie had a lot of other bad things going for it. Like I don't think you can't blame Megan Fox for the fact that like half the movie was just like jokes about Randy Couture's dank. Like that's not really, that's not Megan Fox's fault. So yeah, and like you said, this also is not one that I would grade on a curve either. It's like a good 3 or 4 star movie. Using the letterbox reviews on it. But it is interesting though with IMDb that when people review movies on IMDb, it just feels like there's a certain segment of IMDb that just are gonna, if a movie isn't like Scorsese or something like that, whatever, like Jean-Luc Godard, they're gonna give it like a 2 star out of 10. I don't know why that is. Like it's funny. I think I talk to people who make their own, who indie filmmakers or whatever. They just kind of have learned to accept it that like there's gonna be people that are gonna kill my movie no matter what on IMDb. And you just got, I guess you have to have a thick skin about it.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because there be movies that were on Mystery Science Theater
Right.
that aren't necessarily bad movies. They were just on Mystery Science Theater because they were a 50s sci-fi movie,
Yeah.
but they get review bombed, I think, just because of that fact. So,
Yes.
uh, you know, when you see, something like I don't have the exact numbers, but like a 50 sci-fi movie that's usually considered a good movie, but when it's got like carrying a 4 or 5, you're like, no, that's more of a 6 or 7 if you've seen enough 50 sci-fi movies. You know what I mean? Where it's like, it's just one of those things where I don't think many people on there will give a movie a 9 or let alone a 10.
Right.
Uh, so I mean, because even like the best movies, I think rare. I think what Godfather had like a 9.0 or something, but
Right.
I don't even know if that sticks because it fluctuates so much now.
Yeah, no, that's a great point too. Yeah, it's whenever you do kind of crowdsourcing like that, you're gonna always get people that just yeah. I noticed what's great about Letterboxd. I never put my numbers on. So you're right. Yeah, Godfather's 9.2 out of 10. Yeah, yeah. So even those like they kind of yeah. It's I guess that's probably your best bet is something like Godfather. But one of the things I like about Letterboxd, even though I don't put my own star reviews on there because I usually save them for my podcast and the blog and everything. But I do like to be able to look at like, all the people that I follow on there and kind of see where the skews go. And you notice like Subservience, I didn't see how many people really had looked at this one. But like, especially like with a Marvel movie, it's like when I get out of a Marvel movie now, it's like, how did I feel watching that Marvel movie? And then I look at the kind of the skew and it's like if sometimes it's like they're more 2 stars and then they kind of top out at 3 and then every once in a while you see like a 4.5 or a 5 for a movie and then it goes in the other direction, right, where it's like all 4s and 5s and then you'll see like that 1 or 2 person that has to give it a 2 star movie. Yeah, it feels like with IMDb sometimes you get more of those have to give it a 2 stars on IMDb.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm pretty liberal in my stars anyway. Like a movie would have to be really bad for me to give it just 1.5. Like if
Yeah.
it's just like if I got through it in one pass and it's not good, it's a 2 star movie. But if it's really got to offend my senses for me to give it 1 star, and then it's just got to even be just like just have a soul as black as tar for me to give it anything less. So I mean, so even like a 1 star movie for me on IMDb is at least a 3 star because I mean, it's uh, the I think the more movies, and this is interesting too. I think the more movies you watch, I think the more you realize that there's nothing wrong with a 2 star movie.
Yeah.
It's just get like if I something I can finish in one day, one sitting, without like pulling my hair out, and I finish everything. Like
It's the same.
that's
Yeah.
just the kind of person I am. It might take me 2 or 3 tries. I think the longest that ever took me was that. what was it? The Jackie Chan Great Wall movie. I think that took me like, oh my God, I think it took me like 9 days to get through that. But
Right.
because it was, and it wasn't that it was bad. It was just not Jackie Chan, what a Jackie Chan movie I wanted to be watching at that moment.
Right.
I didn't want him in a historical, war movie. I just wanted him climbing walls and catching babies and and that wasn't that, but
No,
yeah,
I
I mean, I'm pretty determined. I'll watch anything once, and even the worst shit I wind up watching twice
right,
somehow.
exactly. Yeah, I think The Irishman was that for me. It took me a few days to do The Irishman. I just kind of kept, breaking it down into pieces. And so I think if we may end up getting Apple TV again this summer because of baseball, because they play baseball games on Apple TV. So sometimes like the Phillies, you can only get them on there. So we may end up getting again, and I may tackle Killers of the Flower Moon finally, if that's up there. But yeah, sometimes those 3 hour epics, those are the ones that I have a little trouble with. But we're like the hour and a half one, it's like what I like about a good hour and a half movie is that it's like when I get through that first half hour, I'm already inside of an hour left. And there's always a good feeling about that. Cause then it's like, okay, 15 minutes now, I've only got 45 minutes left. Another 15, oh, it's the last half hour. And then it's like, okay, you're really breaking through there. I think that's why that 90-minute number is so good.
Yeah, and it's so funny too because some 90-minute movies feel like the longest movie like you've
Right.
ever sat
Yes.
through. Whereas when you're watching a movie that's really good, that's firing on all cylinders, like 2.5 hours feels like oh, I wish that was actually longer because but that's not always the case. But there are some times where yeah, I mean the way I look at it Showdown in Little Tokyo is 79 minutes.
Right.
And if Mark L. Lester can deliver Showdown in Little Tokyo in 79 minutes, anybody can do anything.
Yes.
And just give me the maximum effort for the minimum screen time and you have a winner.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree completely. I was at the comic book movies. It's not so much that I get upset now. I used to complain that the comic book movies were too long, and it's not so much about that. It's that I don't think the comic book movies should feel like they have to be long. 90 minutes for a comic book movie could work. I don't feel like you have to keep tacking things on to make it 2.5 hours. It doesn't. Like you said, if you can get Showdown in Little Tokyo in 75 minutes or 79 minutes, you could do whatever, a Captain America movie or something like that in 90 minutes and in maybe 100, and have it be a good solid movie that does exactly what you needed to do.
Yeah, and I think, we talked about this before. I think the Marvels worked because it was only like 100 minutes. It's like
Hmm.
you have one of these movies that's a little bit more slight compared to the other. There's no big world building moments or earth shaking uh, moments where the MCU, as we know, is going to be changed
Right.
forever. Just give us a three-chord, 100-minute superhero movie.
Yeah.
It's some people may feel shortchanged because it's short, but I feel shortchanged when I'm sitting through another scene of the Avengers just kind of moping around and just kind of like not doing anything. It's like, well, get out there and do something.
Yeah.
But I still haven't seen the new Captain America yet, so I'll have to tackle that one eventually.
Yeah, yeah, me neither. I haven't made it out for that one yet either. I've been, you hear mixed things. A lot of people are saying it's like a kind of a get me by movie, or it's like it just kind of is like a for completists. Which it's interesting because Marvel they don't allow themselves to do get me by movies anymore. It's like with Star Trek. Star Trek could do a Star Trek 3 that is just enough to kind of allow you to make a Star Trek 4. But Marvel, it's like every movie has to make 850 $900 million billion, and it's like sometimes you just need a Star Trek 3. It's not the most amazing out of the series. 2 is really great, 4 is really great, 3 just does its job to get you to number 4, and sometimes you just need a Star Trek 3.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, heck, even Star Trek 5. I mean,
Yeah,
it's like people hate that movie. I'm like, dude, it just feels like a 100-minute version of the show. I mean,
yeah,
and that was the interesting thing about the old Star Trek movies is like the every I think it was Siskel and Ebert said that the even ones are good, the odd ones are bad. It's like no, the odd ones just feel like really long episodes.
right,
It's just like they have a mission, they have to complete their mission, the mission's over. and it was just a bigger version of it. Whereas, 2, 4, and 6 had like the meteor, uh, villains. They had the meteor, interactions between the crew, and yeah, like when you're doing a long running series, like everything doesn't have to be this earth shattering uh reveal, or like, because then if every movie has this huge uh franchise shaking moment, then what's a franchise shaking moment? You gotta let them breathe every now and then, and I think that's what they're starting to learn, maybe. But uh, I don't know. I wouldn't bet on it.
No, right. No, I think that and I mentioned this when I did my solo podcast on, phase three of the MCU. I think that period of time between Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame, it was one of those, high tide raising all boats moment where comic book movies just couldn't do wrong. And you get, billion-dollar earners from things like, Captain Marvel, or you get even like, 600 something million for an Ant-Man movie. And I think there was this sense of like, oh, if we just keep making these movies, people will go out to see them. It's like, no, that was a special moment in time where people were just so jazzed about comic book movies that, even Venom made a ton of money, or, Aquaman. And I think now it's kind of coming back down to earth, but I don't think Disney wants to come back down to earth. Like they're like, if 2019 happened once, why can't it happen again? And it's like, no, it can't. You did it. That ship has sailed.
Yeah, and I think with the new Avengers movies coming out, I think that's fine to, like, almost, if you think about these phases as like a series finale, like, yeah, bring everybody back in, get all the cameos, get all the fan services, but let these like other movies just be movies. They don't have to be these big tentpole events, and because ultimately they're just going to cannibalize each other. And people like me, once we miss one, we wind up missing two or three, and then
Right.
we just have to watch them all on Disney Plus. But
Yeah.
uh, it's like these things ebb and flow over time. I mean, sometimes the eating's good, sometimes the eating's bad, and you just uh, you know whether you watch it opening night or catch it on Disney Plus, I'm gonna watch it. It's just like you got to have something really special for me to be like, okay, let me put my shoes on, get my
Right.
coat, go out and go see it. And I don't know if I'm quite there yet for Captain America, but like the next bargain matinee, yeah, maybe I might see it then.
No, exactly. And I think the other thing too is that, from our perspective as people who watch a lot of bad movies, right? Or a lot of movies that, have things go wrong with them. Or like you said, we grade them on a curve. It's like I think for a lot of people who are fans of movies that don't watch the kind of stuff that we watch, they don't realize how incredible it is that they were able to, that the Marvel Cinematic Universe, for the most part, in those first three phases, they were able to pull off like 23 movies with no like really bad movies. Like there's some that don't work as well as others, but there's no like Elektra in that group or Catwoman in that group. And that's the rarity. That's the hard thing to pull off. And the fact that they pulled it off, it's not like it's something that they should just always be doing. They shouldn't expect that they're always going to pull that off. And I think that's kind of a big piece of this is that the fact that they were able to land that plane the way they did with Avengers Endgame, um, that should be considered like the unicorn event. That's not that's the exception that I think confirms the rule in a sense.
Right. I mean, y- Babe Ruth didn't hit a home run every time,
Right,
so
exactly.
you just go into these hoping for the best, and just hopefully they know to just kind of dial it back. You can't have it set to 11 every time out.
No, we that should be, someone should talk to Kevin Feige and just say, and Bob Iger and everybody, just say, hey, sometimes Star Trek 3 is gonna get is good enough. It'll get you to the church on time.
Yeah, Star Trek 3 is one of those 3:15 movies that it always came on, and like you watched it and you're like, well, it's not two, but it's, and honestly, three's only flaw is it doesn't have Spock in it till the end.
Right.
And other than that, it's as good as a Star Trek movie can be without Spock. So
Yeah, yeah, no, it does what you needed to do for sure. So, but yeah, I mean, I guess at this point, Mitch, we're starting to wrap up here. Anything that you wanted to plug as we're wrapping up?
I mean, I got the website Video Vacuum at Blogspot. Always find me there. I'm on Twitter for some reason. I just can't seem to shake it. It's like a person in a bad relationship, but I just can't leave it. I don't know. But you can find me on Twitter, Video Vacuum there, and on Amazon if you look my name Mitch Level, you can see all my books. My latest one is the Chop Saki companion, and just a run through for the various kung fu genres of the years and biggest stars and oddball classics. And yeah, that's that's what I've been up to.
Yeah, and for people listening, the link to your website and to to your news book are going to be in the description of the podcast. So definitely, on your iPhone, just click the link; it'll take you right there, and you can pick it up. Because your kung fu. If people are kung fu movie fans, it's really fantastic. I mean, it's a good read front, cover to cover. But I also like it. I've got the Kindle version, so it's on my phone, which works out a lot more easily for me because it's like wherever I'm at. If I'm like going through Tubi and the kung fu movie comes up, or I can take a look and see like, okay, get a sense of what Mitch thought of that one before I dive in.
Yeah, and it's like so there's so much of that stuff now that's available, which is kind of crazy because like there's like the Wu-Tang Collective
Yeah.
streaming channel, and there's like a lot of just kind of like janky uh Roku streaming channels that have just like endless amounts of kung fu movies. And when I was growing up, you had to go if your video store had, five or six, like old school kung fu flicks movies, you were doing pretty well.
Yes.
And in my day, like we there was a kind of like a mall that had basically just been, a dead mall that was turning into antiques and just art, half empty arcades and stuff. And they had this one kiosk that had um kung fu bootlegs, and I got like Shogun Assassin there. I got Project A, City Hunter, like all the Jackie Chan movies that hadn't been released officially in America at that point. Like we're talking like late '90s or so, and so that was like my first real taste of like anything that wasn't just like a Canon Ninja movie or just like a Bruce Lee, so from that about that age, like 12, 13, like I was just like rabidly any kind of uh crappy kung fu movie. Even the great kung fu movies are great too, but even sometimes all you need is just bad dubbing and bad sound effects and guys like arguing about who stole whose kung fu first, and that's a good way to spend 90 minutes.
It really is. That's amazing about the kiosk though, because that was definitely something for me. Like I never had that growing up. Boston when I was growing up, Boston was kind of considered too far. Even though it was like a little over an hour away. It wasn't as connected. Because I could imagine people going to Chinatown maybe and finding something like that. But yeah, that's so cool because there's like a bit of a comfort food feeling for me when I think of like those Hong Kong movies, especially the ones that took place in modern times with the lighting and how the film stock was, but also just sort of like the way the sun was when they were shooting scenes outside. That when I watch those kinds of movies, I just get this kind of feeling of like, oh, that just feels so good.
Yeah, it's like that washed out, like it was processed
Yeah.
from film the video back to film again or something. There's
Yes.
something to that where the pan and scan's a little too wide.
Yeah.
There might be a scene where it's just a bridge of a guy's nose talking.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's stuff like that. You're just like, chef kiss. Like
Oh.
that's what I needed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a bowl of macaroni and cheese or something. It's
Yeah.
just like or
Oodles and
pizza.
noodles.
Yes, it was exactly. It just hits the spot, and so yeah. So for people listening, Mitch's newest book it's in the description. So you click on that and check that out. And yeah, it's again, you go a little bit deeper. And so for people, now with so many of these movies available now on streaming services, yeah, use that guide to kind of give you a sense of where to go next. Because yeah, it's a great rabbit hole to fall down for sure.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Mitch, for coming on us again, our 200th episode. So thank you for joining me here for that. And thank you again. It was a great conversation here on Subservience.
Yeah, thanks again, and congrats on number 200.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you everybody for listening. We'll be back soon. Bye, everyone.
Direct